Begin. The scent of bay rum and fresh-cut hair always clung to Elias's barber shop, a comforting smell in the dusty western town. Sunlight streamed through the front window, glinting off the rows of gleaming razors and the tall, ornate mirrors. Elias himself, with his quick hands and even quicker wit, was known for a clean shave and a good yarn. He could make even the grumpiest rancher crack a smile. Among his regulars was Silas, a man whose age was etched around his eyes like old maps. Silas didn't talk much, but his gaze missed nothing. He was a retired scout, folks said, who had seen more of the world than most men read in books. He'd sit in the waiting chair, whittling a piece of wood, his eyes moving from the street outside to the reflections in the mirror, then back to Elias as he worked. Elias often felt Silas's quiet eyes on him, a watchful presence that was both a little unsettling and strangely reassuring. Silas wasn't there for the chatter. He was there for something else entirely, though Elias couldn't quite put his finger on what. Begin. One afternoon, after the last customer had left, Silas remained, whittling a piece of cedar into a tiny horse. Elias was sweeping up stray hairs, humming a tune. "You got good eyes, Elias," Silas said, his voice raspy like dry leaves. "You see what folks don't mean to show." Elias paused, broom in hand. "Just good at my job, Silas." Folks relaxed in the chair. They let their guard down a bit. Silas nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the tiny horse. "More than that, you notice the twitch of an eyelid when a man lies about his poker winnings. You see the way a woman's shoulders stiffen when her husband mentions the new preacher. These are tells, Elias. Little clues. Everyone's got him." He looked up, his eyes sharp. "I could teach you to read him better. Make you see the whole story, not just the words." Elias leaned on his broom, intrigued. The idea sparked something in him, a deeper curiosity than just barber shop gossip. "What good would that do a barber?" he asked, though he was already hooked. "Knowing people, truly knowing them, is always good," Silas replied, offering a rare, thin smile. "And a man who knows could do a lot of good or bad in this world." Elias, always eager to learn, agreed without another thought. Begin. Silas began Elias's lessons right there in the barber shop. He'd point out small things, almost invisible movements. "See how old Mr. Abernathy shifts his weight to his right foot every time he talks about his cattle?" Silas would whisper, watching through the reflection in the mirror. "That's not just him standing. That's him getting ready to argue, even if his words are sweet." Elias, razor poised, would start to notice. He saw the flicker of annoyance in a man's eyes when his wife mentioned a new dress, even as he smiled and agreed. He learned to spot the slight tightening of a jaw when someone was holding back anger, or the way fingers would drum softly on a chair arm when patience wore thin. Silas taught him about the tells of the hands, how a man who was lying might unconsciously tuck his thumbs, or how a woman's grip on her purse would tighten if she felt threatened. "It's like reading a book without words," Silas explained one quiet morning, tracing a pattern on the dusty floor with his boot. "Every twitch, every glance, every way they hold themselves, it's all a sentence. And you, Elias, you're learning the language." Elias practiced, his keen eyes now seeing more than just stubble and split ends. Begin. Soon, Elias couldn't unsee the tells. They were everywhere, like newly discovered stars in a familiar night sky. His barber shop, once just a place of shaves and haircuts, became a grand stage of unspoken stories. He saw the subtle flinch of a man's hand when the newspaper mentioned a recent robbery, even as the man loudly condemned the thieves. He noticed how Mrs. Henderson, usually so proper, would unconsciously smooth her skirt whenever talk turned to the new general store, a nervous habit that hinted at something more. Even the simple act of a shave became a lesson. Some men would clench their jaws, their muscles tight with hidden worries, while others would slump, their shoulders heavy with unspoken burdens. Elias learned to adjust his touch, to offer a softer word or a moment of silence, guided by these silent signals. He saw how news of a good harvest brought a lightness to a farmer's step, while a rumor of drought made a miner's eyes narrow, even if his lips stayed sealed. The world, once a collection of faces and voices, was now a rich tapestry of tiny, honest movements, each one a thread in a larger story. And begin. One blustery Tuesday, the swinging doors of the barber shop parted to admit Mayor Thompson. He was a portly man, well-dressed, with a booming laugh that usually filled the room. Everyone in town respected him. He was the face of progress, always talking about new roads, new businesses, and especially new land deals. Elias greeted him with his usual easy charm, guiding him to the chair. As Elias draped the cloth around the mayor's neck and began to lather his face, the conversation, as always, turned to town matters. Mayor Thompson spoke at length about the exciting new plots of land opening up on the edge of town, how they would bring prosperity and growth. He gestured with his hands, his voice hearty and full of conviction. Elias listened, nodding at the appropriate moments, but his newly sharpened eyes were busy. He watched the mayor's face in the mirror, observing every flicker, every minute shift. He noticed the way the mayor's eyes seemed to dart away for a split second when he mentioned the price of the new parcels. He saw the subtle tightening around the mayor's mouth, almost a grimace, when he spoke of the benefits for the common folk. These were small things, nearly invisible, but to Elias, they were like shouts in a quiet room. And begin. Elias continued to shave Mayor Thompson, his hands steady, his mind racing. It wasn't just the darting eyes or the mouth tightening. Each time the mayor uttered the words land deeds or spoke of property sales, a very specific set of tells appeared. First, a fleeting, almost invisible tightening of the skin around his eyes, as if a thread had been pulled too tight. It was gone in a blink, but Elias, with Silas's training, caught it. Then, more subtly, Elias felt a shift through the barber chair itself. The mayor, who usually sat squarely, would ever so slightly favor his left foot, pressing down a little harder on the floor. It was a tiny movement, barely noticeable even to Silas, who often spoke of gait as a tell. Elias noticed it because his focus was absolute, honed by weeks of observation. He tested his theory, casually asking about the new town hall location, which had nothing to do with land sales. No tell. Then he brought up a new land dispute down by the river. Instantly, the eye tightening and the foot shift returned. Elias now had a very specific, repeatable tell for Mayor Thompson when the topic of land deeds came up. And begin. That evening, after locking up the shop, Elias found Silas whittling on the porch, a thin wisp of smoke curling from his pipe. Elias settled onto the step beside him, the day's observations heavy on his mind. Silas, he began, I noticed something about Mayor Thompson today. He described the subtle eye tightening and the favoring of the left foot, making sure to emphasize how these movements only appeared when land deeds were discussed. Silas listened, his gaze fixed on the distant hills, not interrupting until Elias had finished. When Elias fell silent, Silas took a slow drag from his pipe. Land deeds, you say? He mused, the words hanging in the cool night air. Interesting. He paused again, then added, There's been quiet talk, mind you, about folks getting rich quick on land out on the plains. Folks who seem to know just when and where the town's going to expand. Speculation, they call it. Silas's eyes, usually so distant, now held a sharp glint. A man with a tell like that, connected to talk like that. It ain't coincidence, Elias. You found a loose thread, son. A very important loose thread. And begin. With Silas's words echoing in his mind, Elias felt a new purpose. He wasn't just observing tells for their own sake anymore. He was looking for pieces of a puzzle. In the coming days, Silas, from his usual perch, would subtly direct Elias's attention. See that fellow walking with the mayor? The one with the fancy watch chain. Silas would murmur, referring to men who seemed to be new to town or known for their questionable dealings. Elias, while sweeping the sidewalk or honing a razor, would then discreetly watch. He noted who visited the mayor's office, the times of their meetings, and the expressions on their faces as they left. Silas, meanwhile, used his old Scouts network, a quiet whisper here, a shared drink there, to gather bits of gossip. He'd find out if a certain out-of-towner had been asking about specific plots of land, or if any new money had suddenly appeared in places it shouldn't. Their combined efforts were like two streams flowing into one river, gathering more strength and information. Elias's barbershop became an unwitting hub of intelligence, capturing the silent language of the town, while Silas's connections uncovered the hidden currents of its underbelly. They didn't speak loudly of their findings, but a quiet understanding passed between them, a shared sense of pursuit. And begin. One sunny afternoon, Elias was sweeping the plank sidewalk outside his shop, the rhythmic swish of the broom a familiar comfort. He glanced up, and his heart gave a little jolt. Across the dusty street, near the hitching rail, stood Mayor Thompson. And facing him was Mr. Sterling, a man whispered about in hushed tones, known for buying up land just before new developments were announced, always turning a tidy profit. They weren't talking loudly, but Elias's eyes, now sharp as a hawk's, fixed on the mayor. As Sterling leaned in, whispering something and handing over a rolled-up paper, the tell Elias had identified flashed across Mayor Thompson's face. The tightening around his eyes was more pronounced this time, almost a wince, and Elias could practically feel the mayor's left foot pressing into the ground, even from across the street. It wasn't fleeting anymore. It lingered for a moment, a clear sign of discomfort mixed with something else Elias couldn't quite name. Sterling then gave a quick, satisfied nod, tipped his hat, and walked away, leaving the mayor alone, looking a little too pleased with himself. Elias knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he had just witnessed something important. And begin. That evening, Elias found Silas already waiting, perched on his usual stool inside the barbershop. Elias recounted the encounter with Mr. Sterling and Mayor Thompson, describing the tell's strength and persistence. Silas listened, his expression grave. "That's it then," he said, tapping his pipe against his boot. "We've got enough rope to tie a knot." "What kind of knot?" Elias asked, feeling a surge of nervous excitement. "The kind that brings things to light," Silas replied. "There's only one man in this town who's got the backbone and the means to do something with this kind of information. Mr. Bartholomew, editor of the Western Star." The next morning, under the guise of an early haircut, Elias and Silas paid a visit to Bartholomew's cramped, ink-stained office. Silas spoke first, laying out the quiet rumors of land speculation. Then Elias, surprisingly calm, explained his lessons with Silas and how he'd observed Mayor Thompson's specific tell. He detailed the eye tightening, the foot shift, and how it correlated precisely with discussions of land deeds, culminating in the meeting with Sterling. Bartholomew, a man whose pen was sharper than any razor, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was listening, truly listening, to their unusual tale of unspoken truths. And begin. Bartholomew listened, his pen scratching notes on a pad. He looked from the quiet, weathered scout to the earnest Barber, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. "Micro-expressions, you say? And a favored foot," he mused aloud. It was certainly an unusual tale, but the precise details and the men's conviction gave it weight. He had heard the whispers of land speculation too, but whispers weren't enough for a newspaper. "Thank you, gentlemen," Bartholomew finally said, rising from his cluttered desk. "This is compelling. I can't promise anything, but I'll look into it." Quietly. True to his word, Bartholomew began his own investigation. He started by poring over land deeds at the county office, cross-referencing names and dates, looking for unusual patterns of sales and purchases. He also began discreetly questioning those who had recently bought or sold property on the town's outskirts. He frequented places where information flowed freely, like the general store and the saloon, listening more than talking, trying to piece together who benefited most from the new developments. He didn't jump to conclusions, but the breadcrumbs Elias and Silas had laid out led him down a path that grew increasingly suspicious. And begin. A few weeks later, the latest edition of the Western Star hit the streets, causing quite a stir. The headline was carefully worded: Questions arise over recent land deals. Who truly benefits from town's growth? The article, penned by Bartholomew, spoke in general terms about the rapid increase in property values on the town's outskirts and the unusual timing of certain land purchases. It didn't name Mayor Thompson directly, but it laid out a clear pattern. Land was being bought cheaply by a few individuals just before public announcements of new town projects made those very plots incredibly valuable. The story hinted strongly at insider information and unethical practices that seemed to benefit a select few at the expense of the common citizen. It asked pointed questions about fairness and transparency in civic matters. Elias watched as customers read the paper in his shop, their murmurs growing louder, their brows furrowing with suspicion. Silas, whittling quietly in his corner, offered a rare, almost imperceptible nod to Elias. The first stone had been thrown, and ripples were starting to spread across the calm surface of the town. And begin. The Western Star article acted like a pebble dropped into a still pond, and the ripples quickly turned into waves. Suddenly, the quiet murmurs that Elias and Silas had picked up on became loud conversations in every saloon, general store, and kitchen. Folks who had dismissed their own nagging feelings of unfairness now had a voice, a reason to question. Old Man Hemlock, who had sold his patch of land for a song only to see it resold a month later for 10 times the price, came into Elias's shop, his face red with anger. "It ain't right, Elias," he grumbled, slamming a fist on the armrest. "Always knew something was fishy. That Mayor Thompson, always talking about what's best for the town, but it always seems to be best for his friends." Others shared similar stories. A farmer recalled how he'd been urged to sell his family plot quickly, being told the town wasn't expanding in his direction, only to see a new road laid directly through it weeks later. The newspaper article gave them courage, and soon, a steady stream of citizens began visiting Bartholomew's office, eager to share their experiences and suspicions. The editor's desk was piling high with accounts, each one adding another piece to the growing puzzle. And begin. The growing clamor of public dissatisfaction, fueled by the newspaper's relentless, fact-based inquiries, began to corner Mayor Thompson. His booming laugh grew weaker, replaced by a nervous cough. He stopped frequenting Elias's barber shop, preferring to get his shaves in the quiet privacy of his home, likely hoping to avoid Elias's watchful eyes. His usual confident stride became a hurried shuffle. Bartholomew, armed with a growing stack of citizen testimonies and irrefutable land records, began publishing more direct articles. While still careful, the language shifted from questions to discrepancies and patterns of undue profit. The Western Star printed maps showing how key plots, bought cheaply by Mayor Thompson's close associates, were now at the heart of proposed town expansions. The mayor attempted to dismiss the accusations as baseless rumors and political attacks, but his words rang hollow. His tales, Elias imagined, would be flaring like fireworks by now. People started turning away when he walked down the street. Town meetings, once docile affairs, became tense gatherings where citizens demanded answers, their voices loud and clear. Mayor Thompson's carefully constructed image as the town's benevolent leader was cracking, piece by piece, under the weight of mounting evidence and public anger. And begin. The truth, like a river bursting its banks, could no longer be contained. With the town in an uproar and Bartholomew's newspaper providing undeniable evidence, Mayor Thompson had nowhere left to hide. The investigations revealed a clear pattern. The mayor had been using his position to tip off a small ring of land speculators, including Mr. Sterling, about upcoming town projects. Knowing where new roads would be built or where the railroad would expand, these speculators would buy up the land at rock-bottom prices from unsuspecting citizens. Then, once the official announcements were made, they would sell those same plots for massive profits, sharing a portion of their ill-gotten gains with the mayor. The land deeds, once dry legal documents, now told a story of betrayal and greed. It wasn't just speculation, it was a deliberate, cunning scheme. Mayor Thompson, the respected official, was a puppet master, pulling strings to line his own pockets and those of his cronies. The townspeople felt a deep sense of anger, not just at the loss of their land or money, but at the deception from someone they had trusted. The fine comb of justice had finally raked through the tangled hair of deceit. And begin. The town council, faced with overwhelming public anger and the irrefutable evidence compiled by Bartholomew, had no choice. In a tense, packed meeting, Mayor Thompson was formally stripped of his office. His booming voice was reduced to a whimper as he tried to defend himself. But the collective glare of the townspeople, many of whom had been swindled, silenced him. The land speculators who had worked with him also faced ruin, their reputations shattered and their ill-gotten gains under scrutiny. Justice, in its own slow but sure way, had been served. And at the heart of it all was the quiet, unlikely partnership of a barber and scout. Elias, with his keen barber's eye, had seen the flicker of truth in the mayor's micro-expressions. Silas, with his lifetime of wisdom garnered from watching men and nature, had recognized the pattern and guided Elias's observations. Their combined human-scale cunning, rooted in simple observation and shared knowledge, had brought down a powerful man and cleaned up a civic mess. The town breathed a collective sigh of relief, a little wiser and a lot more watchful. And begin. With the scandal settled and a new, honest interim mayor in place, life in town began to settle into a new rhythm. Elias's barbershop, however, gained a new layer of legend. Folks now whispered about him as the barber who sees everything, not just for his expert shaves, but for his uncanny ability to understand what wasn't being said. Customers would sometimes try to catch his eye, curious if he was reading them, or even confess little worries, knowing Elias had a knack for listening beyond words. Silas, for his part, returned to his quiet ways. He still frequented the barber shop, taking his usual seat by the window, whittling. His whittled creatures became even more intricate, perhaps a sign of his satisfaction. He rarely spoke of the Mayor Thompson affair, but a knowing glance exchanged with Elias, a slight dip of his head when Elias successfully navigated a difficult customer, spoke volumes. He was a silent sentinel, a proud teacher who had passed on a valuable skill, confident in his students' refined perception. Elias understood that while the big problem was solved, the subtle art of observation was a lifelong practice, and Silas would always be there, a quiet affirmation of his sharpened vision. End. Begin. And so, Elias continued to cut hair in his barber shop, the familiar rhythm of comb and shears a comfort. But his world was no longer just about trims and shaves. Every customer who settled into his chair brought with them a silent narrative, a tapestry woven from tiny gestures, fleeting expressions, and unconscious shifts. He saw the quiet pride in a young father's posture, the hidden worry in a merchant's hurried blinking, the unspoken longing in a lonely widow's gaze. The mirrors that lined his walls, once simply tools for a good haircut, now reflected a deeper truth, showing him glimpses into the very souls of his townsfolk. He didn't just hear their words. He understood their unspoken stories. The town, with all its bustling life, its secrets, and its simple joys, unfolded before him with a clarity few others possessed. Elias, the barber, had become its quiet, perceptive chronicler, forever changed by the wisdom of a scout and the subtle language of humanity. End.